966.
This is the 966, the podcast that focuses on all things Saudi Arabia from the two guys who produce the most widely read daily newsletter on the kingdom, episode 12, Richard. This week we'll be talking about what will happen with oil in 2022, redefining citizenship in Saudi Arabia, and two major new announcements from the kingdom. But before we get started this week, a special shukran to all those who have smashed that subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and especially for those of you who have given us a review. Thank you. Shukran. Also, comments and feedback, ideas, whatever you got, shoot them our way. We love hearing the feedback and everything from listeners and viewers so far. You can get in touch with us at the966podcast@gmail.com. Send us a tweet at 966podcast. Or if you have any negative feedback, obviously, write to Richard. Just cut me right out of it. We also want to know before we get started, occasionally we might misspeak or say something that is incorrect. It's going to be very rare, but we strive for perfection here, of course. So look in the comments section of the podcast or on YouTube. We may post a correction to what we say there. So just check that out. Let's get to it, Richard.
We can't afford to be just pure on that. We'll misspeak and misstate and every now and then. So we'll try for big gaffes.
For big
super
gaffes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Richard, what's your one big thing this week?
Well, I originally was thinking about these artificial intelligent robots in the Grand Mosque in Mecca, which is pretty cool. Of course, we like this technology. Anything with a 21-inch touchscreen is attractive to us. But I'm going with U.S GCC Iran working group statement. And let me just read parts of it. Mm-hmm. Senior officials of the United States and the members of the GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, convened their working group on Iran at the GCC's headquarters in Riyadh on November 17th, as decided by the U.S GCC Foreign Ministerial on September 23rd. The U.S. and GCC member states condemned a range of aggressive and dangerous Iranian policies, including the proliferation and direct use of advanced ballistic missiles and unmanned aircraft systems. The U.S. and GCC member states agreed that Iran's nuclear program is of grave concern and also called for Iran to fully cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency. The U.S. and GCC member states discussed a wide range of regional issues, including the situation in Iraq and Yemen, agreed that Iran's support to armed militias across the region and its ballistic missile program pose a clear threat to regional security and stability. They further agreed to hold subsequent meetings of this working group to discuss these and other issues within its terms of reference adopted in its inaugural meeting on earlier on 3 November 2015. The U.S. and GCC member states affirmed that Iran has a better alternative to these continued escalations and contribute to a more secure and stable region. Members of the GCC briefed on their efforts to build effective diplomatic channels with Iran to prevent, resolve, or de-escalate conflicts, backed by strong deterrence and defense cooperation with the United States. They described a vision for these regional diplomatic efforts developing over time to promote peaceful ties in the region based on a long history of economic and cultural exchanges. The U.S. and the members of the GCC affirmed that deeper economic ties after the lifting of U.S. sanctions under the JCPOA are in the mutual interest of the region. This is interesting. One of our early podcasts was about U.S.-Saudi relations, and we talked about how they might change under President Biden. And we are aware that the Saudis in particular weren't particularly fond of Barack Obama, in large part because the JCPOA that was negotiated with Iran was done without any forenotice or consultation with our Gulf allies. One of the things that we talked about in that earlier podcast about the difference between what the Biden administration might bring was a greater emphasis on process and transparency. And this is an example of that. This GCC working group, was set up in 2015, really was dormant, but it's been reinvigorated and is now a framework to consult with, inform our allies, key allies in the region. And this certainly was not in evidence under President Obama, and certainly was not around under President Trump. So it's a new means of business, and I think it's a better means of business, and I think it will be attractive to our allies in the region. And this also came out, and just part and parcel of this, the special envoy for Iran, Robert Malley, was in the Emirates, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia in mid-October, again, consulting with our allies in the region about what the U.S. is thinking of doing with Iran or hopes to do with Iran. That's just good diplomacy. Mm-hmm. And so kudos to the Biden administration.
Yeah, the statement also sort of calls attention to the fact that the iron is hot in terms of trying to make some advances with diplomatic advances with Iran. They've just had their elections. The statement says, and I don't have it right in front of me, but it says something like, we call on Iran to seize the diplomatic moment right now, take advantage of the fact that there's a chance to make some progress here. So that's very interesting. I think you mentioned the GCC, the body was set up in 2015. I think didn't President Obama visit Saudi Arabia in 2015 and for the inaugural or the first meeting?
He may have.
I think I only say that because I saw a bunch of photos of him on our website, sustg.com, of just all those meetings. And that was sort of before the Qatar rift. So it was an interesting collection of photographs. The GCC HQ is just outside of Riyadh, is a really cool building.
It is a cool building.
My one big thing this week is Saudia, Saudi Airlines. They might be spending big money in the coming years. Saudia is potentially targeting an aircraft order from Airbus, or Boeing that could total well above 100 jets. And as part of a push to lure more tourists, Bloomberg reported this news. This is coming out of the Dubai Air Show, which concludes today. The carrier is targeting a fleet of 250 aircraft by 2030, which would mean adding around 100, while renewing a significant chunk of an existing 150 plane fleet. This is according to Saudia CEO Ibrahim Koshi. Most of the requirement is for twin aisle planes, also known, like me after Thanksgiving dinner, wide body planes, though options for Airbus narrow bodies could be converted to firm orders, the report added. I know aircraft manufacturers and airline operators negotiate a discount for planes in deals like this for big purchases, but this would be a massive spend from Saudia. And right now, there's a lot of potential energy in the aviation space in Saudi Arabia. You have this announcement, the potential for a new airline to compete with Qatar and Emirates, which was mentioned, but we haven't heard a lot about recently. A potential major overhaul to Riyadh's airport in the works. Jeddah's airport just recently finished its major facelift, transforming an airport previously considered one of the worst in the world to a modern hub. In 2020, Saudi Arabia was set to have the second Saudi Air Show, but was canceled due to the pandemic. Organizers of that event said another event would be announced in 2021, but none has been made. Richard, I just think this is interesting because this is like if you're an executive at Airbus or Boeing, you paid attention to this statement from the Saudi CEO.
Absolutely. And I'd like to see Boeing's coming out of a very dark period. And it'd be great if they can start ramping up and regaining and accelerating sales. We did an earlier discussion of this on Boeing's commercial market outlook for 2021 to 2040. So their 20-year forecast. And they're looking at that outlook. We're looking at the Middle East requiring 3,000 new airplanes valued at $700 billion, and aftermarket services in terms of maintenance repair worth another $740 billion. So about $1.5 trillion over the next 20 years. Obviously, some of that's in Saudi Arabia with Saudia. And hopefully Boeing, I'm a homer. I hope Boeing gets it all.
Yeah. You can find that segment, by the way, on our YouTube channel or our podcast website, 966.transistor.fm. Very interesting discussion on Boeing's outlook, which was great. I'm a homer too. I'm hoping that hoping that Boeing gets it, or at least many of them, and this benefits the United States for sure over France. Yeah. Let's move to topic one. What will happen with oil in 2022? The IEA on Tuesday upped its average Brent crude oil price assumption for 2022 to $79.40 a barrel. Brent is expected to average $71.50 a barrel this year, Richard, we've talked a lot about oil on the 966 for obvious reasons, but the IEA doesn't talk about oil prices very much. As Reuters notes, this is a rarely published take on prices. The IEA told Reuters that including price assumptions in monthly reports is rare but not unprecedented. But this report is interesting. Richard, let's talk about oil in 2022.
Yeah, this is exciting news, and it sort of affirms what we're seeing. But let's talk about oil, actually. Let's talk about oil prices. And because I think a lot of what we refer to or allude to in our discussions, we sort of assuming an understanding of oil markets. And that's not necessarily fair. I mean, I talk a lot about November 2014 as a pivotal point for Saudi Arabia going forward. So let's talk about the oil prices. I'm going to go back roughly 10 years. So in 2010, the average OPEC basket price, so the price of oil that they were selling as OPEC. So in 2010, I'm going to leave out the decimals. In 2010, it was $107 for the year. 2011, $109 for the year. 2012, $105 for the year. 2013, $96 for the year. So that's basically 4 years at oil prices above $100. 2014, $49. 2015, $40. 2016, $52. 2017, $69. 2018, $64. 2019, $41. 2020, $69. And that's OPEC's basket price. So when you look at this, and this is why 2014 is so pivotal, they're just coming off of basically 100 or more than 100 average price of oil for 4 years running. Price started to plummet, and we know why. We talked about this because of the huge explosion of U.S. shale production. So basically in 2014 and 2015, Saudi oil revenues were halved. And by the way, and this is the genesis of Vision 2030. Those 2 years when they didn't even know what their budget was going to be and if they could continue to sustain any kind of spending level that would be sufficient for their population, is when it became very real, and they moved very aggressively into Vision 2030, which was announced in 2016. So what drives these oil prices, in my opinion? We have Rosneft, I think, just came out and said, there could be $120 oil next year. Bank of America this summer said we're going to break 100. I'm not a believer in that. I don't think we'll see 100 again. Why? Because of U.S. shale. And let's look at some of the numbers. U.S. shale, why? And by the way, the price, I think one of the reasons we're not going to see 100 this year, in 2022, is that U.S. shale is coming back online. Let me get a quote here. The Permian, which is in Texas, is the primary driver of U.S. output at the moment. And during 2020, output from U.S. total oil output dropped by more than 2 million barrels a day. This was, due to coronavirus, and production is gradually returning. And the Permian just had the biggest month of growth that it's had since, I think, since 2014. So it's coming back strong, and the rest of the other fields in the U.S. will come back too, and driven, of course, by price. Now, the reason that this is the case is the Dallas Fed did a very interesting study in 2019 where they found that the oil price that U.S. shale companies need to profitably drill new wells has closely tracked prices for long-dated oil futures since 2014. 2014, remember that pivotal year. The close tracking of the two numbers suggested that the U.S. was seen as the world's marginal producer when it comes to meeting future oil demand. That connection is held through 2020 and this year, despite moments of turbulence in the spot oil market and decline in U.S. rigs. So what it's saying is what I've always said, and other people have said, that Saudi can set the floor on, OPEC can set the floor on oil price. U.S. shale sets the ceiling. So we've had a great year this year in terms of oil. If you're looking at oil producers, projected to be a better year next year. But we're waking up U.S. shale, and that means, as this says, they're the ones who determine the ceilings. And if the markets in terms of oil futures are sinking off of U.S. shale prices, then the markets will do the same in 2022. So this is great, and this is for the Saudis. All right, let's make hay while the sun's shining, and they should. But I don't see it getting to 100. This is one reason why Vision 2030 and so much of Saudi Arabia's greater fiscal responsibility is so important, because they understood their oil revenues aren't going to. We're not going to have 4 years of $100 oil ever again, probably. Mm-hmm. And so we have to reduce our costs, and we have to find non-oil revenue. And they've done that, as we've seen in their VAT and their other taxes. They're going to bring in $85 billion in non-oil revenue in 2021. They brought in 85 in 2020. They'll probably bring in that or a little more in 2021. So they're moving based on these oil prices. So, the premise was the oil price, as IEA has put out. And we can see that oil prices have driven so much of Saudi policy, and specifically the move into Vision 2030.
This report is interesting. It has a lot of interesting facts in it. For example, U.S. output made up for half the increase in global oil production last month. But right. The IEA doesn't see U.S. production getting to pre-pandemic levels until the end of next year. It's just, right. There's a lot of this. It's really interesting. And obviously what's driving it, I love the phrase, Saudi set the floor, shale sets the ceiling, because shale is more expensive and not as easy to extract oil from the ground. Whereas the Saudis and others have it not sitting on the ground, but it's a lot. I mean, their cost to produce per barrel is much cheaper than shale. They just have that advantage.
Exactly. But the thing that shale has done, I mean, in 2014, the average break-even price for U.S. oil producers was, somewhere around 75 in terms of WTI. Mm-hmm. By 2020, it's about 47. So the technology that they brought to bear on extraction has been really transformative. Now, I will say that it's gone up. The break-even oil prices for U.S. shale producers has gone up over the last year. It's at 57 now. But when you have access to production in which new wells cost about $7 million to drill, and in fact, for many U.S. tight oil, shale oil producers, they have sitting there what's called, let me find the term, drilled but uncompleted wells. So they have a lot of these sitting there. So when investors in Saudi oil, U.S. shale oil companies said, okay, we've been pumping cash into this as you expand. We now want dividends and buybacks. So reduce your capital expenses and give us more money back, which is, again, one reason why they're on the sideline, as well as the pandemic. Well, when oil is at $70+ per barrel, they're coming off the sidelines, and they're coming off pretty cheaply and pretty quickly. And that's why they set the ceiling. And that's why the market says this is our marginal producer is U.S. shale oil.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oil prices also have so much politically tied to them. I mean, right now, just the discussion about gas being very expensive in the US is going headfirst into the discussion about how we need to speed up the energy transition away from oil. And right now, a lot of it's falling on the lap of President Biden. Some are calling for him to tap the strategic reserve, which probably won't do much in terms of alleviating prices or inflation at all. But it's really interesting. This is a very political issue, as you know.
And but they just did an auction for plots in the Gulf of Mexico, just recently, and it was very busy and very attractive, in part because I think in future ones, there's going to be higher taxes and more restrictions. So they got a good turnout for welling plots in the Gulf of Mexico. And in part, those are apparently deep water wells are less carbon, fewer carbon emissions, so they're attractive in that sense. But yeah, we've got to, the world has got a challenge to mitigate carbon emissions while fueling the planet. So we'll see how we thread this needle.
Yeah, deep water platforms may emit less, but occasionally accident happens and a bunch of oil starts spilling into the water. So you have a different type of group after you when that happens. Fascinating subject. If only we were smart enough, Richard, to buy a bunch of oil when the WTI was at negative territory at the beginning of the pandemic after the Russian Saudi oil spat, we would be rich.
We would be rich. But then, I've been stupid on Amazon, been stupid on Bitcoin. Apparently I can't get past my idiocy in any kind of investment.
We should just do the opposite of our investment inclination. And I think that might actually make us money. Who knows?
We should do the George Costanza in life.
It's the opposite. Moving on to topic 2, Saudi Arabia grants citizenship to a group of talented expats. Richard, Saudi Arabia is, at least for a few people, redefining citizenship. A royal decree issued last Thursday grants citizenship to, quote, experts and exceptional global talents. I assume we're among those, who will contribute to the growth of the kingdom, according to the news carried by the state news agency, the Saudi press agency. The naturalization program will seek out individuals in Islamic scholarship, medicine, science, culture, sports, technology, with a view to creating a, quote, attractive environment to cultivate and retain exceptional talent to help achieve Vision 2030 and its goals. Richard, you've spent time growing up in Saudi Arabia. You have been following the kingdom for as long as you've lived, pretty much. Citizenship in Saudi Arabia isn't something that has changed much over time, despite all the changes going on there now.
No. Well, identity has changed, and we've talked about that. Identity is evolving, and we know that the kingdom started under Prince Abdullah, but also obviously with King Salman and Mohammed bin Salman, there's a move to try and promote a national identity versus a tribal or a religious identity, and not necessarily to supplant it, but to augment it. And so that's an identity. Citizenship. This is sort of the boutique citizenship that other countries have started. Qatar did it initially in 2018. Singapore has done it. UAE has done it. So they're moving along this line. Saudi Arabia, as ever, has a little twist on it, and I think it's interesting because the first beneficiaries. So there's 27 that these were awarded to, and there's a whole list. And you have luminaries in law, medicine, science, technology, cultural, sports, that sort of thing. But unlike Qatar or UAE, about a quarter of these 27 new citizens are Sunni and Shiite religious leaders, some of whom don't live in Saudi Arabia. And this is interesting because I think Prince Mohammed bin Salman is trying to convey a transition to a more moderate view of Islam, because all these scholars, and again, Sunni and Shia, were, except for one, were signatories of the 2020 Mecca Declaration. It called for cultural and religious tolerance and understanding. And so this was from the Muslim World League, which I gather the Muslim World League is a vehicle that Prince Mohammed has paid a lot of attention to in trying to redirect its message to a more religiously tolerant message and promoting interfaith dialogue. So again, Saudi Arabia is doing what Qatar and UAE and Singapore and others have done, but with a nod to the realities that it's the seat of the Islamic holy sites, and it's a world leader in the in the world of Islam and Islamic countries throughout the world. So it's speaking to a specific audience with these awards and the people that they named, which I think is interesting. Again, this is sort of boutique citizenship. It's not the kind of citizenship that, occurs, if you've been 30 years working in Saudi Arabia and raised your family there, where you might have access to citizenship, and someday that might come. All these countries that have a very strong national identity, it's a difficult thing. It's not like the United States. It's just always sort of seen it as an immigrant country and a polyglot, and all are welcome. Well, not so much, recently, but historically that's been the habit. Some of these aren't habits for Saudi Arabia or the GCC, other GCC countries that have done it. But it's an interesting step, and it's a nod to the fact that they need to always have to continue to diversify their talent base and the human capital that they attract to the country.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about before the show today. This sort of seems like there aren't a lot of people affected by this yet. So it's an interesting story, but it's not very impactful to somebody who's been working in Saudi Arabia for years or decades and feels like Saudi Arabia is their home now and would like to become a citizen. This is sort of like being knighted, like we were talking about. I mean, it's sort of
Yeah,
like
it's
sort of like, hey, these people are really important and significant, and they're Saudis. But I thought this was interesting too, because one thing that sticks out to me in the Saudis, that many Saudis that I know and have met, and the same I'm sure with you, is that they're very proud to be Saudis. They're very proud of their heritage. They take great pride in it, and they consider it culturally significant, not better than others, but just very important to them. And I think that's one reason why there will always be sort of a excitement for Saudis about being a Saudi and being able to understand other Saudis as families, based on how far they go back. And it's an interesting story. This is interesting story direction. It's not really impactful yet. But Saudi did grant citizenship first to a robot before any non-Saudi. So
yes, a woman robot who was uncovered. So these are subtle signals, and that's what I mean. Sort of, when the quarter of these are religious scholars, they're trying to send a message. We'd like to promote a more moderate Islam. And it's funny, you talked about Saudis and Americans are similar in a lot of ways. Americans think we have a destiny. Many Americans think we have a destiny. Saudis feel the same way about their country. Mm-hmm. As to your point, there is a lot of pride, and there is a sense that it's special and has a significant role to play.
Yeah, well, Americans are special, so it's true. But
it's funny. It's funny, and this is an aside. There's always been historically, and people have commented on it, there's a natural affinity of Saudis have for Americans, and I'm thinking many Americans have for Saudis if you get to know them. And I think this is the Saudis have liked Americans, and this is really broad brush stuff. Tend to be pretty open, tend to laugh. Are very strong in terms of family, and it's funny when you look at the early Americans business people and other things that went to Saudi Arabia. They're from the oil patch, and so South, very strong family affiliations. Obviously, that resonates with Saudis. The other thing is Saudi Arabia is, the U.S. when the United States was founded. Pretty much everybody, Europe, looked down upon us as sort of unsophisticated, uncivilized newbies. We were seen as kind of rubes. And, in terms of the Middle East, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf oil states, seen the same way. I mean, these ancient civilizations in Egypt and Syria, Mesopotamia, Iraq, Iran, and they see these upstarts, these unsophisticated, Bedouin, camel drivers and desert dwellers rise and start creating a cities and have global political influence, and people look down on them. Same as Europeans look down on us. And I'm just saying there's interesting parallels. We could go off on a tangent on that. But, in terms of pride in their country, it is palpable. Just like Americans have pride in their country, there are similarities.
It's always interesting to think about how a few of my friends from the UK think of America. They're just like, so you guys speak English, but you have guns and you can just kind of do whatever you want, and it's so big. It's funny to think about America as like formerly in many areas a British colony, and now the differences are very huge. They're obviously one of our biggest allies in the world, but it's just very interesting to think about.
Your historical sites are 300 years old. I mean, get real.
Yeah, the oldest building is 1670 instead of 430.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty significant.
Well, look at our Roman aqueduct. Oh, we got a target.
We have 2 targets in this town.
Exactly.
But it's an interesting story for Saudis, and certainly you would echo this. They are the most hospitable people in the entire world. It's just honestly hard to argue that. So very interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if this expands over time and they become more like Spain or France, where like, it takes a decade to become a citizen, but if you come and work and put in the time and contribute, you can become a citizen. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually goes down there.
Yeah, it's a start. They got a long way to go.
Indeed. Topic 3, my favorite topic, mega developments. Two new mega development plans this week. Richard, it is only Thursday evening, so we still may have 1 or 2 more mega projects left to announce this week.
Check your Twitter.
There are 2. Let's first start near the capital, Riyadh, where Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is planning an eponymous new city called, drumroll, the Prince Mohammed bin Salman nonprofit city, which will be built on a 3.4 square kilometer, that's 1.3 square miles of land that the Crown Prince donated. This city is essentially set up so that nonprofits, education, even actually venture capital firms, people working in the space will be located just outside of Riyadh. It's kind of a cool design. If you look online, we'll actually share it. It's on our website, sustg.com, but we'll share it in this video and on the podcast website as well. Very interesting. That was announced earlier this week. And the second is Oxagon. It's Oxagon? Oxagon?
I think it's supposed to sound like oxygen. So
so Oxagon.
It sounded like oxygen when on the promo video.
Okay, so Oxagon. Which I really, really check out our listeners and viewers to go, and we're actually going to throw it on the screen right now. But it's going to be the world's largest floating industrial complex, sort of in the shape of an octagon. And it'll be located just outside of Neom, which itself is a planned megacity. Neom did not say how much the city would cost or how the complex would be engineered to float, but you should see this thing. A graphic rendering makes it look like sort of like the Death Star if it were flat, but on the water. It's all in industry, so it's really cool looking, actually. Oxagon will feature a port and a logistics hub, and it will be a comprehensive cognitive city focused on robotics and AI. Richard, you love mega developments like this, don't you?
Well, I do, actually. I just have some thoughts on this one. Well, before we get there, let's go back to the nonprofit city. Serious question. Can you tell me what a nonprofit city is?
It's a city that doesn't make any money.
That's what we are. That's what we are.
I don't know what a nonprofit city is, but I do know that this is the first nonprofit city ever.
Well, it was a big announcement. And I think, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has this fully evolved MISC Foundation, which is very deeply, it does a lot of things on innovation and entrepreneurship and youth. It's been established and it is active and it's done a lot of good work. I think this is sort of where they're going to house MISC. So maybe it's the physical embodiment of the foundation. But I don't know, again, I don't know anything about how a nonprofit city might work. So that, both of us are in the dark sort of, but I understand. I guess I understand the motivation. I'm not sure why it has to be localized in a nonprofit city, but I'm not an expert on this.
Yeah, it's interesting that it will be just outside the capital. I mean, I guess the way it's interesting they're doing a separate development for this instead of being like, hey, this like district in Riyadh, we're going to revitalize this, and this is where we're going to have MISC. But I mean, MBS really cares about MISC. Like it's consistent since he has ascended to power, and that MISC is his charity that has an annual conference. They do a lot of work in Saudi Arabia. They do a lot of good work too. He's very proud of that. And you're right. I think this is where MISC will be located. I don't know where this will be MBS City in relation to Qiddiya or any of these other planned. I guess Qiddiya is now under development, but some of these other neighborhoods outside of Riyadh, they're also developing. But it is interesting. I mean, it is the first nonprofit city. So,
all right. So on this Octagon. All right, so I'm going to go full grump.
Let's go. Let's grump it out.
Full grump on this. First, before I go full grump, though, I think we need to have a common vocabulary, and we need to understand what these giga-projects are. Now, this is giga-projects that they're, multi-billion-dollar investment strategies and structure, construction, and they're really ambitious things. So let's enumerate the Saudi giga-projects, and I break them into two categories, and maybe this would help you understand. So the first category is greenfield projects, so giga-projects. So greenfield, so blank slate. So this would be, for example, the Red Sea Development Company, which is building a luxury tourism venue in northwestern Red Sea coast, huge, 34,000 square kilometers. 50 hotels, 9 islands. So this is a huge giga project. Right up the coast is Amala, which is a ultra luxury tourism site. And you could say, and so both of these are actually progressing. And now just in September, these two projects were put under one operating body. So now these two very large luxury and ultra luxury tourism projects on the Red Sea are controlled by the same authority, but those are two of the giga projects, greenfield projects, because there's nothing there. Then another greenfield of the gigas is NEOM, of course, everyone knows about it. $500 billion mega city of the future, Vision 2030 flagship project, hub for innovation, sustainable ecosystem. It's gotten a lot of press. Greenfield. There's some people up there, but there's really nothing up there. Qiddiya, which we mentioned, which is another, this is $8 billion commitment. It'll be more than that. This is essentially an entertainment sports city southwest of Riyadh. Six Flags is committed to be there. They'll have an F1, Formula One racetrack. They'll have golf courses. It'll be
golf courses. Yep.
Huge entertainment thing. So again, nothing there. Greenfield. And so then let's look at others where there may be the urban growth projects, huge construction projects in existing cities or existing locales. So one is Diriyah, which we've been to, which is gorgeous. Awesome. That's a $17 billion development. So Diriyah is, those of you who listen to us, Diriyah was the capital of the first Saudi state from 1744 to 1811. Second Saudi state had the capital in modern day Riyadh, the kernel of modern day Riyadh. So Diriyah is an ancient site. It's a heritage site, UNESCO heritage site. So that's a huge project, and it's gorgeous. Jebel Omar, this is a huge Mecca development. Within Mecca, we're talking, $4 to $5 billion, and it's hotels, residential buildings, that sort of thing. But it's intended to try and translate these, 2 to 3 million pilgrims that come every year for Hajj and Umrah into having them stay for a while. That's good business. And that's, it jives, very closely with their efforts to increase tourism. King Salman Park, 4 times the size of, it's in Riyadh. 4 times the size of New York City's Central Park, another huge $1 billion investment. Important because it's a quality of life thing, which is a major tenet of Vision 2030. Riyadh Metro, which we know is getting close to starting. That's a $23 billion investment, and that's coming to fruition shortly. The Asir development, they committed 13 billion to the southwest part of the country, mountainous, as a both cultural and heritage, but also travel and tourism. Then you've got the Jeddah Metro, which is coming, the Mecca public transport program. So these are all, I call those aren't greenfields, those are urban expansion or huge improvements and construction projects on existing sites. So how many was that? So let's call all these gigas. That's pretty impressive. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just ran down a list. I don't even know the numbers. I mean, typically they say there's 6 giga projects, but there's more than that when you really, count them up. And this is really impressive with billions, trillions of dollars committed to accomplishing these giga projects. And I understand, especially in the greenfield projects, when in today's world, so here's today's public relations environment, what do you, ESG is pervasive, environmental, social, and governance. We're living in a world where everyone talks about the 4th industrial revolution. So, we're talking about emerging technology breakthroughs in AI, robotics, Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, nanotechnology, material science, quantum computing. So this is 4th industrial revolution. This is the world that these giga projects are entering. And then you have the global energy conversion. So I get the hyperbolic, all these things, the announcements on all this stuff and the ambition of them. And I think especially with the greenfield and actually all these giga projects that I mentioned, they make good sense. NEOM is tremendously ambitious. But if you're going to do this and you have a blank slate, then you should be ambitious. And maybe they'll accomplish what they want in NEOM. Maybe they'll get 50%. Whatever it is, it's going to be, it'll be something. But what the heck, go for it. And again, in this environment of the 4th IR and ESG, you've got to couch it in certain terms. And why not aspire to these things? I think this is enough. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm saying this is truly impressive, and let's get this right. Mm-hmm. We don't need, Oxygen. There was a snarky comment from some Twitter guy, and it's what he says: "Congratulations to whichever consulting firm got paid a large sum of money to come up with this pie in the sky idea. NEOM didn't say how much the city would cost or how the complex would be engineered to float." All right. Most everything Saudi Arabia does, brings out snark from commenters all over the world who predisposed one way or another. But, Oxygen's cool, but I mean, all these giga projects are amazing in and of themselves. I don't think we need to have exclamation point, another thing announced. I'm Midwestern to the core. My dad's from Missouri. My mom's from North Dakota. So show me state. I don't think it would hurt Saudi Arabia to underpromise and overproduce on occasion. They've become very good though at the glitzy PR announcement.
That's just not how they do it though. We should mention though that major cities or like new cities built from, like you say, greenfields, but just built from nothing. That's sort of been going on for a little while. I mean, before the King Salman era, you had, the King Abdullah Economic City. You had all of these planned economic cities, actually, several of them. I don't know if they ended up getting built or being scaled back significantly, but King Abdullah Economic City was at least one of the first that I'm familiar with. And Richard, do you know if they built it to exactly their ambition, or if they scaled it back? Or, I mean, because obviously they have a major golf tournament there. I mean, KAEC exists, but the Giga project isn't a new phenomenon, I guess, is my point.
No, and that's a good point. That King Abdullah Financial District got hit, was very ambitious. It's amazing. It's just amazing. It's very impressive.
Well, sorry, I was actually talking about the KAEC, but the financial district is another one. Yeah. So sorry to interrupt
KAEC,
you.
actually, they tried to move into a private ownership, and it's languished considerably. I think they're trying to revive it, but it's languished. It really hasn't. There are companies that set up business there, but it's not anything like they had hoped. But it doesn't mean that the plant's not there and the facility is not there and it can't be repurposed, like the KAFD, the King Abdullah Financial District, which is being repurposed as a tax-free zone and a center for finance and other companies that want to come in a specific tax-free zone right in the middle of Riyadh. And the King Abdullah Financial District was hit by the downturn in 2014, 2015 when they, as I said, their revenues halved. So everything sort of came to a halt. And also, to be honest, again, here we go. So that was proposed and hailed as having the equivalent office space of Miami, right in that heart of Riyadh, and it was just overshot. And also, obviously, when revenue is plummeted, they had to reposition themselves, which is only smart. You can't really ping them for that. But they are now, they're going to finish it up, and they're going to make it a free trade zone, which is great. Good job. You have to adjust on these things, and on all these giga projects, you have to adjust as you go along. Which is, like I said, I don't think it would hurt them to under promise and overperform on these things, because these things are ambitious enough. They're just extraordinarily ambitious. I don't know where oxygen fits in it. Oxygen, is that right? Oxygen.
You tell me. I was saying oxygon.
Well, I said oxygen, but the oxygen. But NEOM's ambitious enough. We don't need another big giga announcement. That's not going to happen, or isn't fully it hasn't been substantiated, or all the details run down. Let's get these other giga projects going. Some of them are well on their way, like the Riyadh Metro. Qiddiya started, Red Sea is started. There's construction in NEOM. Jebel Omar is huge. Ad Diriyah is amazing. King Salman Park is going to be amazing. These are all things that will contribute to the Vision 2030 and to the Saudi country, populace and the economy going forward. It's impressive enough. Let's not just throw out stuff that's really pretty to see.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, that's full grump on the oxygen. And like I said, there's the other things are really interesting and moving along, but the oxygen sort of brought out the Grinch in me.
We need the grump, and it's almost Christmas, so the Grinch is coming out. So
that's true. That's true.
One thing that's interesting about NEOM, I guess it's probably the last thing I'll say about it, but when I talk to Saudis about it, they gloss over the future AI city and robotics and automated transport, and they sort of just put that aside and say, Lucien, you got to see the site they're building this thing on. It is right on the sea. It is completely beautiful. It's close to Sharm el Sheikh. It's just completely untouched. And it's interesting because that's sort of their view. They're very proud, not just of what NEOM could be or anything like that. They're just proud that land is Saudi. They're like, this is so beautiful. The water is turquoise. So,
and it should be. And you're like a mile in the Red Sea development. They're on that gorgeous coast with that gorgeous Red Sea water, and it's smart. These are things that will attract tourism, and NEOM itself might be a transformative center for technology and a new way of living. We don't know, but I understand the aspirations, and let's go get them and make them come to life, and maybe well down the road, when it's fully vetted and fully thought out, let's talk about an oxygen.
I think that'll do it this week. We'll pick up the grumpiness next week. And
again, let's try and limit it to just this one.
Again, if you could smash the like button or the subscribe button where you're viewing this or listening to this, that helps us a lot. Richard, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucien.